Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast, where we sit down with seasoned CMOs and emerging talents in sales and marketing to explore the wins and occasional losses that shape today's leaders and the strategic maneuvers that can help propel you to the forefront of B2B marketing.
Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Jorge Bestard to our show. Welcome, Jorge.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, glad to have you. Jorge is from Canva. So he is the head of sales and success for the European division. He's based between Madrid and headquarters, which is in London. And he oversees the entire sales team over there, which is exciting. Canva, as we all know, we use it as consumers. We use it as enterprise folks. It's an Australian-based company. He's got people in the US, I'm sure he works with, people in Australia, people in Europe. So we'll talk a little bit about the dispersed team and all of that. So let's learn more about him and how to drive sales and marketing alignment across borders. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to start with you. Tell us your story. Tell us who you are, where you came from, what's your background, and why you're excited to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from Spain, from a little town in the outskirts of Madrid. Very early on, I got into tech. So when I was in high school, I built a startup with my brother to the point where it grew, where we raised a little bit of capital and we went over to San Francisco, and then we just never really looked back. We got into tech, built a Airbnb for local venues and local musicians. Eventually, we got acquired, and that gave us a little bit of liberty to be a little bit more selective with where we wanted to pursue our careers. I was never a great coder. I want to say that the first startup, I did part of the coding, but it looks terrible. Now that I look back at it, it's not great. But I was always good at the go-to-market side of things, both on the sales side and the customer success side, and a little bit later on in influencing product on what is now called product-led growth. So that has led me to a few different startups over my years, and eventually landed in Facebook, Meta. And after 5 years heading the European team and a short stint in Asia, where I headed the APAC team, I decided to come back to London, where I met John Itel. And he convinced me to move to Canva. And it's been about 2.5 years at Canva already. Currently leading the sales and customer success team for EMEA. Very
nice. For those of you who haven't listened before and don't know who John Itel is, he is my sort of day-to-day partner in crime. He runs sales for us here at Demandbase. And so I love that we came full circle here, which is great. But you touched on a lot of things that I think people always want to know, or at least I want to know, which is entrepreneurial spirit, likes the startup, started your own company, which is kind of cool. Like PLG before PLG maybe was cool. Sounds like there was a little bit of that. Working international, leaving home, coming back, all the things. And all of that. And you have almost no Spanish accent, which is pretty amazing. So there's a lot in there, which is great. Tell me about the entrepreneur side. So I think I hear people all the time say, I would love to start something. I just don't have an idea. Instead, like if someone would just give me an idea, I could run it. But I don't know how to come up with an idea. How'd you and your brother come up with an idea?
The idea was, so we were musicians ourselves, and I was 16 when we built the startup. So we would go to local venues and they would ask us, where have you played in the past? And we had nothing to show them, right? So we decided to build a website where the venues could rate us, but it was only like, hey, rate us. Tell us if we're good, if we can take it to other venues. And then eventually we got other local performers saying, hey, can we join? So we decided literally to code a login. And we left for the summer. And when we came back, we had 10,000 monthly active users. So me and my brother, we sat down at the dinner table and we said, hey, I have no idea about this whole tech world. I have no idea how to run a company, but I think we got something here. And we just decided to run with it. So to answer your question, it was literally a problem that we had that we needed a solution for ourselves. So I do get that question a lot as well. It's like, I don't have ideas, or I don't have, but generally if you see an idea that is just painful, or something that you are experiencing a certain amount of pain that you can be passionate for, for an extended period of time, I think the idea is how you're going to solve that and how you're going to bring that to market. But it has to be something you feel that it's really painful, because at the end of the day, the startup has a 5 to 10 year lifetime, and you have to be willing to dedicate 10 years to it, right?
Yeah, that's true. One, and that's probably the best ideas come from your own pains, which is great. Wow, that's really cool. A friend of mine started a startup a couple of years ago that does something similar, but it was for service staff, like basically like hiring, like waiters move around a lot, or like maitre d's, or like customer service reps at like nice hotels and things. And so they move around properties a lot. So he was looking for like some way to like take their performance reviews with them from place to place, which was, kind of on their service skills and things like that. Kind of similar idea, like ratings based on where you are so that it goes with you. So that's pretty awesome.
Love it.
Very cool. Well, good. Okay. So you said that you really thrive in the go-to-market space and have leaned in that direction. So I'm so excited to have you as our first sales guest outside of John. And so with that, tell me about, I assume you work with marketing on a pretty regular basis, regional marketing, corporate marketing, events, whoever it is. Tell me more about that relationship. What do you think helps that relationship be positive or negative or helpful?
I've seen various iterations of alignment between sales and marketing over the past decade, and it's really a tricky one, right? I think it's almost like a sibling that you fight, but you love at the end of the day, right? And but I think if you look at the root cause of some of the challenges that companies have. And now, as well, the past couple of years, I've been investing as well in companies and trying to understand really how their core operational revenue structure works. I think B2B companies always try to fix their go-to-market with very tactical execution. So I'll say, hey, this is broken. Let's try to hire a new growth marketer to do SEO for us, or let's change from MQLs to MQAs. And I think they ultimately do that because it's easy to really solve, a very superficial and visible problem. You can put that in a slide and it's a new tactic, but it's missing the core of it, which is how do marketing and sales and revenue as a whole align better. I think the real root cause that I've, at least from my humble experience, that I've been able to see is a little bit deeper, and it's a little bit more invisible, and is that the operating model and the data model that companies sometimes unconsciously have is flawed. If I think about the cause of this flaw, I think companies they generally operate in an assembly line, and these departments are very siloed. So to give you an example, it's very dear to me. I think marketing gets a lead. Generally, SDRs either they call that lead or they qualify it out, and they pass the baton to sales. Sales takes whatever meeting they can get, and they try to hit their quota with it, right? They typically have these meetings with people that might or might not be interested to buy right now at all. But when one of these metrics do not work, I think the solution comes in that specific silo. So I think the marketing and sales teams that I've seen work very well is the ones that, instead of operating those silos, they think about revenue holistically. What they should really be saying is, hey, we're spending X amount of dollars on go-to-market between sales, marketing, ops, tech, and these are the resources allocations that we can have to hit X number, and this is how we can improve to get more customers for less money. Period. Because if you start tweaking little things, I think at the end of the day you can get SDRs to get more meetings, but that might not translate into sales, or you can get more MQLs, but that might not translate into more SDRs getting meetings. I think having that misalignment really brings kind of that trap that some companies fall into.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know aligning on those foundations is definitely critical. We find ourselves chasing some of those things too. Some of them are foundational items. Some of them are like, was it MQLs this week? Is it SQLs amongst enterprise? Is it our close rate amongst the SMBs? And we're sort of chasing all these things around and basically playing a little game of whack-a-mole versus kind of figuring out, like, do we make the right assumptions from the beginning? Do we have the right operating model and the way that we operate? We're looking at the right metrics that are going to drive the right behaviors. So I love what you said there.
Yeah, and I think marketing impacts just every single part of the customer lifecycle, right? It impacts the demand creation, the capturing of the demand into actual revenue, the conversion of the pipeline to revenue. So it impacts so many things that I think as a sales leader, you have to be really conscious of how that impact is affecting your business. So a lot of times the conversations with my marketing leads, it's not about how many leads they're bringing in, or it's not about how many SQLs are accepted. It's about how it's impacting each one of these legs of our business, right?
Okay, so all that makes sense, I think, when you talk about sort of those sort of core operating principles. Does that look any different international than it does here? Especially if some of those, like say a marketing ops function might be sitting in a headquarters or might be sitting in the US, or content production may be in a different place, or timelines, or where your sellers may be in different places around the world. Like, how does that change things?
Yeah, that does change things quite a bit. I mean, the very obvious one is that I think with the kind of the tail end of the golden age of SaaS, I think there's a hyper local SaaS competitor in every very niche market, right? And that's definitely true in Europe, which is the market that I operate, where we will have a hyper local competitor in Slovakia, or we'll have one in Italy. And if you give a very generic message and a very generic, unique selling proposition to them, it's just not going to resonate, and they're going to go with the local player. Marketing, I mean, unless you have a marketing person in each market that really, really understands the market, and if your marketing team is centralized, generally sales is at the front line, which can provide that feedback. So I think closing the loop of what works and what doesn't, and what marketing can provide from a localization standpoint is very important. And then there's other things like tech stack, which sometimes some of the tech stack that's out there is very, North American driven, and sometimes it doesn't have the nuances of Europe. To give you a very concrete example, a lot of the times companies that provide lead lists to SDR so they can outbound, a lot of them are very North American centric, are not very GDPR friendly, so we can't even touch those lists, right? So we have to go with a local player. But I think there's endless examples of that as well.
Yeah. So when you talk about localized, I think people kind of take that term as like, oh, I'll turn my S to a Z. Oh, I will, I'll say keen instead of excited. Like there's a couple like little, like little word changes. But how is the messaging different? Like, do you feel like is it just the voice of the words, or is it actually different problems? Like, is what Slovakia is struggling with the same as Italy, is the same as the US, or are they all very different? As an example, just as you mentioned.
Yeah, they're all very different. So just to give you a very North America example, it's as if you were trying to solve a problem in Tennessee with a solution from California, right? It's just like even those two states, the same, very similar culture, similar language, similar currency, similar nation, but they're very, very, very different. Now imagine extrapolating that to a different religion, different culture, different way of buying, different currency, and different economic realities, right? So when you're trying to sell to, say, a car manufacturer in Germany with a very North American messaging, it just completely does not resonate. They don't care about the same things. There's companies that we talk to in Europe that have been around for 150 years. So when you tell them, if you go to them with the messaging is like, hey, your company will not be around if you don't deploy this, they say, well, hold on a second. We've been around for 200 years.
Long before you were, probably.
Exactly. So it's a little bit of a different message.
Interesting. Okay. I like that. Yeah, we hear it for us, for account-based marketing, we hear a lot about that it's perceived different. Like here, it is a go-to-market motion. There is tech involved. There is a mindset. There's alignment involved. But when we hear Europe, we often hear it's a strategy. It's not actually like a play. And so we talk a lot about, okay, well, how do we make sure that we are marketing appropriately to an account-based strategy, not the tool? And then how does then the tool kind of figure that out? So we figured out just that nuance for us on how it's different, for just between us, like, well, a lot of Europe, but specifically in London, where our European headquarters is, is sort of that question as well. So I think that's great. How do you get that feedback back into marketers? Are you providing that? Are they using gong calls and kind of pulling them through? Like how's that information getting back to your marketing team?
Gong is actually one of the tools that has changed the way that I operate, and has changed the way that I'm able to get access to the front line. I really I've always admired those kinds of leaders that are the ones, as you say, that shut the lights out at the end of the day and close the door, right? So they're actually getting in front of the actual problems. And I think Gong and revenue intelligence tools provide that. What we generally do is we will do a collection of Gong calls or snippets that we found very, very, very relevant for that for those markets, and we're able to distill those and provide them to marketing and say, hey, the campaign that we're trying to do around X, Y, and Z, let's try to adapt it with these nuances that we found are very common in Spain or Portugal or the specific region. It's very different if they hear it from us, from the sales team, than when they hear it from our clients. And I think the beauty of these revenue intelligence tools is that you can pick out keywords that you're trying to say, and you can track them, and you can see how they influence win rates, right? And you can do that across different languages. But before, I know English, I know Spanish, I know a little bit of French. But my team is they cover 10 different languages, so I wasn't able to help out or pick out those insights from those different languages. Now with revenue intelligence tool, I can. So that's completely transformed the way I think about my team and coaching and helping marketing understand the cultural nuances.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring up kind of you, your team, the coaches, and marketing. Is that something, because we think our listeners primarily are kind of senior marketing leaders who want to become a CMO, or other CMOs who want to become a sort of more modern CMO. And all of us are sort of managing teams, or our individual contributors are working closely with sellers. Is this a responsibility that you carry as the head of sales for your region? Or is it something that your frontline sellers have those relationships with marketers and are able to provide that through? Like, how does that empowerment kind of communication and feedback loop work, that people feel like? How do you create a culture of connection all the way through your organization that says even my most junior sellers feel comfortable giving feedback to our marketing team?
Yeah. So to answer your initial question, yes, there is that connection between the individual contributors on the sales side and the marketers. We operate very close in Europe because of those particular nuances. I think the starting point of that relationship from a marketer standpoint is it comes from a point of empathy, right? I think sales generally is the one of the only teams that is 50% of their salary is dependent on them hitting their numbers, and I think marketers in our team, they really understand that. So they listen, they ask, and they have the right avenues to be able to surface a lot of those phone calls. I do also, because in those phone calls, I am showing my reports. The marketers also have just free access to contact them and say, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about this client and why there was an objection when you said X, Y, or Z? So little by little, they start forming those connections. And then a lot of times we have me and my direct managers. We have a weekly meeting with our marketing team to tell them this is what's working, this is what's not. This is an experiment that we want to try out. Right now, to give you an example, we're trying some community-focused events where we are going to have events that are sponsored by Canva and are run by Canva, but they're not really Canva events. So we're kind of building the designer community in London. And we were able to do that because sales went to marketing and said, hey, let's try this. Can we borrow a little bit of your budget? And they said, let's do it. So they're very open to new ideas as well.
Very cool. I love that. We just did one in New York it was us partnering with 30 Minutes to President's Club. I don't know if that's a podcast you guys get. That's okay. And it was because one of our sales guys said, hey, can we do a happy hour? I'll invite a bunch of sellers, do it with 30 Minutes to President's Club, and let's talk about how Demandbase can help sellers, and just open that community. We had like 300 people come out, and engage. And it was a great success. And again, it was an idea that came from our sales team that just said, hey, can y'all help me? I think this would be a great thing to put on. So I love that. I think that's awesome. And that sounds like a great way I always tell my team, I say, hey, our number one goal is to make sales love us. It doesn't mean that we're giving them as much bottom of the funnel as possible. It means that they're getting a brand that they can be proud of, that they're getting clear messaging that they can articulate, that they're getting simple pricing and packaging structures, that they're getting the content they need, like all the things. What do you think marketers can do from your perspective to get sales to love them?
Yeah, I think so that as I mentioned earlier, that degree of empathy is very important, and understanding that the stress of hitting or not hitting your number can make a huge dent in somebody's finances, right? So when they think, hey, the sales team is a little bit stressed, or they're pushy, or they're very like goal orientated, it is because they have that very meaty carrot in front of them where they have to hit, right? I think marketers a lot of times the way that they think is a little bit more analytical and a little bit more future orientated, and sales lives in the now. This quarter, how do I get this number? So I think if sales understands that perspective and marketing understands that perspective, I think that bond works very well. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, wherever there's that symbiosis where marketers can support and help sales during that time and share the vision that they have for the future, and sales can share, why they're so focused on certain things. I think it really helps the relationship out.
Yeah. So do you think it matters as you're talking about that? Like, I think to me, it's easiest. And I can't tell if it's because John is easy or my company is easy or I'm just nicer in my old age, but I think it's easier to get along with sales right now because marketing is so critical because we sell to marketers. And so there's a perspective that our opinion is valued because we run Demandbase on Demandbase. And so sellers are like, hey, can you come talk to my customer about this? Hey, can you come share how you guys are solving this? So we become a really critical part of that. You are probably selling to designers, I would assume. Designers, probably some from marketing, maybe also product design, and a number of other places, architects, I don't know. But let's say you're selling to marketing designers. Does that make it easier? Because when you used to be selling to musicians, for example, or whatever companies that, at Meta, maybe you were selling to a different audience. Do you think that makes it easier or worse? Like, has marketing ever been kind of overhead in your mind, and now they're a valuable partner because now they represent the customer? Does that affect your relationship at all?
That is a good question. I think an initial observation that you made is, which is as kind of you grow in your career, I think you work better with your cross-functional partners, right? And it also comes as a realization that your team is not just your reports, but your team is also, like in your case, John. In my case, Amanda, which will probably listen to this podcast. She's the head of marketing for Europe. And that it's so critical to work with them in a way that just works. And when you start off in your career, sometimes in sales, marketing is a scapegoat, right? Marketing is not sending me enough leads. They don't understand their clients. They don't understand the challenges that I'm going through. As you slowly grow within it, it does kind of smooth it out, and you realize the big picture. But I also think, as you say, I think with time, what I notice is the new generation of sales folks that are joining my teams as well, they really appreciate the marketing input. And in Canva specifically, if we want to sell to marketers, it does really help to understand the marketing perspective. And not only that, but we actually bring the marketing team to a lot of calls because they speak the language, right? So. And we're able to showcase this is how a marketer or a creative or a designer uses Canva. And here's another designer who's a prospect, and they're able to just speak it at a different language that sometimes sales were not able to.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. And you're right. I was sort of making a joke, but it's exactly right. I think on the sort of old age call that, like, I don't know what happens as we get older. Like, we realize that it's never black and white, that one team is doing their job and the other team is not doing their job. There's always more to it. I think all of us want to be successful. We all, and that's part of the empathy, right? Trusting and putting yourself in their shoes that we're all doing the best we can. So how do we do it best together, which I think is really powerful. And maybe the sort of pride and ego just sort of goes away after a while as we sort of outgrow some of that. So I think that's great perspective. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Oh, and one of the advices that I got from a mentor early on is, your team is RevOps, is marketing, is the other teams around you, and make sure that anytime that you work together, there's a thought in their mind that says, "Great, I'm going to be working with this person," right? Because you might run into them throughout your careers, and it's so incredibly important that people enjoy working with you and they get a lot out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. I think we beat the alignment one to the drum. So, we beat it in the ground. So we'll go on. So there was you posted on LinkedIn recently about a great interview question that you use when you're assessing sales talent. You said, imagine we're talking a year from now and you haven't met your targets. What went wrong? I'd love to hear what kind of answers you get to that question. And what it tells you about the person that you're interviewing when you ask that question. Yeah,
I get good answers, what I consider good answers. I get kind of cop-out answers, and I get really bad answers. The typical really bad answers are generally where they blame external factors, or they point fingers, and they'll blame the market changes, internal issues. They'll say, or sometimes they'll say like an overconfident answer. We'll say that will never happen. And the answers that I like are answers that are humble, and they say if it does turn out that I am not hitting my targets and that I'm not performing as I would like, the reason would probably be because X, Y, and Z. And they tell me some of the challenges that they've had in the past and some of the ways that they would think about changing those challenges. So I think that generally reflects a self-awareness and a humility and an appetite to learn that is so essential in sales and in any profession. Because in sales, it's in marketing, and I think particularly now, everything is changing so fast. You have to adapt and learn very quickly. And if you're just pointing fingers and blaming everything in the world, then you're just not going to adapt in time.
Yeah, I love that question. I'm going to write that down because I'm going to use it for mine. I love the idea of, imagine we're talking a year from now and you haven't hit your pipeline targets. What went wrong? That's a great question. And I think, that's not even just an interview question. I think we probably in regular conversations, check-ins with from me, pipeline leaders, you sales leaders, or our performance reviews, just hearing, because if I hear, John and I, one of the ways that we work really closely together is we make sure that we're in lockstep, that there is no kind of blame game, that instead we kind of say like, hey, I think we have a pipeline issue or we have a conversion issue. Let's talk about what's going on. We try to work through it, but we also hold our teams accountable, because I'll hear somebody on my team say, well, if the SDRs would, and I'm like, oh, no. That sounds so dangerously close to finger pointing. I have zero interest in that. John always says, I don't need more problem identification. I need problem solution. And maybe he used that on you at Canva. I don't know, but he uses that a lot here. This mindset of like, hey, how do we, yes, let's identify in a quick 30 seconds what's broken. And then let's spend the majority of the time trying to figure out how we fix it versus why it's broken or whose fault it is or any of those things. So I love that question. And I love the cocky answers. That's hilarious. I'd expect nothing less from a really good competitive sales leader. I hope they'd start there and then double click.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Good. I like that. I guess one last question. We talked about it a little bit, but just, is there any great advice? I mean, you've been in this go-to-market world for a long time. You've worked closely with marketing, sales, and CS. Any great advice you have for a young up-and-coming future marketing leader who wants to be successful in their role, working with sales, driving pipeline, growing revenue? Any good advice for them?
Yeah, I kind of want to double down in what I mentioned in the beginning. I think for any young marketer, I would think about marketing holistically and think about every part of the customer lifecycle that you can impact, right? As marketers, you're not just a source of leads and hopefully those leads get accepted, but think about, how you impact demand, how you impact the moving demand into revenue, the conversion of pipeline into expansion, about NNR. Think about I think the revenue holistically of the company, and that will make you stand out above the rest, right? I think marketers today sometimes, because of 10 years of just ultra growth in the SaaS side of things, and really segmenting each of the parts in silos, they're just thinking about that one little silo. And the ones that think about it holistically are definitely above the rest. And that would be my only advice.
Gotcha. I love it. I think that makes great sense. We're probably almost done. As we wrap up, I'd love to hear any fun fact about you that maybe people don't know, or that you would be comfortable letting them know about you.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the beginning, I actually got my start into tech through music, and actually the only piece, I'm quite minimalistic in everything that I have, but the only piece of music or any item that I have and that I carry with me throughout my life is a guitar that I have from the year I was born, which I won't say in this podcast, not to waste myself, but it's a guitar that I carry everywhere around. And the day that John left Canva, I sent him a song with that guitar. So.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's awesome. So is that what you play? You play guitar?
I play guitar, yeah.
Okay. Do you play any other instruments?
A little bit of piano as well.
A little bit of piano. Okay. Yeah. I feel like once you can read music, I'm sure, I don't know, it translates across instruments, I think. My VP of product marketing I just hired has all these behind him, and he plays 7 instruments, and I'm like, amazing. I guess it translates. I grew up playing the piano, but I don't have much beyond that. So, well, very cool. Well, that was great. Thank you so much. Thank you for being our first guest. We're in the sales hat. I think all good marketers, hopefully, are sellers. All good sellers are hopefully marketers. We work very close together. The line is very vague and blurry between us, which is a good thing. That's how we're going to be successful. So thank you for coming. If people who listen want to learn more about you or start following you, what's the best channel to do that?
Yeah, on LinkedIn is where I'm most active. And there I generally post at least things that interest me. So it can be anything sales, tech, marketing related. And Jorge Bestard.
Awesome. Jorge Bestard. All right. Thank you so much. Listeners, thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of the Next Gen CMO podcast. And Jorge, thanks for being here.